Welcome to another podcast of the craziness that lives inside my head. I'm going to start a series and I'm going to call it Coffee Talk. It's going to be a little more serious talk on what went on in the 70s. And what brought this on was it's 2023. COVID's been over. Technically, COVID was 3 years ago. And I noticed that men my age that I was fooling around with have been emailing me now since it's 3 years since COVID, wondering, what are you doing? And you know, when a guy you haven't heard for 3 years start emailing you and saying, what are you doing? We all know what that means. But that brought up something, because they're my age, and it brought up something that I felt what went on in the 70s has not changed in guys my age. Not all guys, but my age. Still acting like what they did in the 70s. My name is Eric, and welcome to the show. What brought this on was I have a friend, quite a few. 3 of them I haven't heard since COVID back in 2020. And I just find it amazing that all 3 contact me within the same week. All 3 are married. All 3 survived GRID. You said, what's GRID? Well, before AIDS came GRIDs, gay-related infection, I think. Was it GRID? Gay-related infection disease. That was GRID. They called it GRID first. And only reason why I thought about it, because I was thinking what was going on just before GRID, just before AIDS, and just before all that HIV, what was going on. Because these guys, I mean, come on. They're my age. They're married. One's been married 4 times, and these are the same guys that was hanging out back in the 70s in the sex bars, in the parks, and the tea rooms, and it just brought to mind that wow, they survived. I survived. Not all of us passed away. We survived, and I'm thinking, nothing's changed with them. That was the thought. I'm like, wow, nothing's changed. And I had a conversation with one who's older than me, 75, 76, hanging out at the gym, working out, trying to keep those muscles going, to attract these young boys. And I'm like, wow, nothing's changed. Now, I don't know about the younger. I mean, my youngest friend is 57. I could think of when I was working. I just retired, but when I was working, yes, I knew friends, people in their 40s and 30s, but that was a different generation. I'm thinking about my generation, guys I grew up with. Nothing's changed. You would say, well, yeah, they changed, they got older, but you would think that if you're going to get older, wouldn't you change your, I guess, attitude? Wouldn't you change the way you do your life? I have one friend named Richie, okay? We met because of Richie. Richie got me into, I think I might have said this in another podcast. Richie is the one who introduced me to the village, introduced me to the sex bar, introduced me to the whole gay life. And Richie, I thought had a problem because he claimed he had a boyfriend. I've never seen Richie with a boyfriend. And I knew Richie, I mean, a good 10, 15 years. And I've never seen him with a boyfriend. But he would always hang out, even on a Sunday afternoon, in a sex bar. If he feels lonely or depressed, sometimes he said, well, I feel a little depressed today. I'm going to the bar. Go to the sex bar. Not just a bar, sex bar. And I went to a sex bar with him, and the attitude is, I'm a social person. If I wouldn't be a social person, I wouldn't be doing these podcasts. I'm a social person. I like to talk. I love to talk. And I could talk you to death. So I'm in this sex bar and I see a guy that I like. And they have a back room. But still, before we go in the back room, we're playing pool. Some guys play pool. The guy was standing around the pool table. I was standing around the pool table. And I would start talking to him. And we start up a conversation. The guy didn't act like he was too interested. Fine. And Richie came over to me, whispering in my ear, "You don't talk in a sex bar. Get back in those back rooms and get on your knees." And I'm like, what? And that was his attitude. And he told me one time, we was on our way to another sex bar. He said, you don't socialize. Nobody want to talk. They just want sex. That's all you want is sex. And I'm like, even back in the 70s, I'm saying, what? I couldn't do that. I'm a type of person, I like to get to know you before I participate in any kind of sexual activities. But back then, and Richie was one of them, they didn't want to get to know you. All they want is the sex. All they know is if you got I hate to be rude or crude, if you got a nice hot mouth or a nice hot dick, that's all they cared about. They didn't want to know you. They didn't want to know anything about you. Then Richie used to say to me anyway, in some of these sex bars, he goes, well, you shouldn't really talk. And they're not going to talk to you. You got police officers in there. You got politicians in there. They don't want to talk. They just come there to have sex. That's not the place to talk politics. It's not the place to talk about religion. It's a place to go in there, have your sex, and go home. That was in the 70s. And now it's 2023. And I'm like, all right, these guys who contacted me after COVID's over, I guess, I'm hearing COVID's not over, it's coming back, but yes, one guy, his name was John. I don't know if I made a podcast about him. Last time we fooled around was 2019. He was married 4 times, and he claimed his 4th wife, she had a hysterectomy, cancer, and she not interested in sex, so she allowed him to have sex with his friends. He just can't bring them home. That was the line he used me in 2019 now. But I remember before we fooled around, we did talk a bit about what happened in the 70s. He's a late bloomer, okay? He came there, he didn't do too much in the 70s. He was in the Army, I should say the Marine. He didn't fool around, he didn't get into the gay sex until late 80s, early 90s. And then he met a master who taught him about BDSM, bondage, sadomasochism, sex. That's what he learned, and he got to like that. Well, this man was married 4 times. I kind of feel sad for him. He was married 4 times. So, doing all those marriages, he's at the sex bars. He's into these sex orgies, and they had a lot of sex orgies back in, I know in the 90s, and when they had private sex orgies in the 90s, they had to make them private because of the AIDS situation. If the government found out about it or whatever, I think they were shutting it down. It wasn't as popular. So that's what he was doing all these years. So now, COVID is 3 years past. What are you doing? Email, what are you doing? Are you busy? And I'm like, yes, I am busy. I'm doing a podcast. I'm doing my thing. I have a YouTube channel, doing a podcast. And I'm like, man, you're 70-some years old. He's older than me. He got to be 76, 77. He got to be up there now. And you're still fooling around. You understand what I'm saying? You would think that the older you get, my grandmother used to say this because I was young. When I was young, my grandmother said, you're young now, you're reckless, but when you get older, you're going to settle down. And that's the whole thing. And for me, I feel like I have settled down. I'm not really interested in the sex bar. Even they don't really have them anymore. And getting to the sex bar, one of my friends who called me, I should say emailed me, he lives in Delaware, Delaware, and there was a movie house in Delaware where he lived, and it got shut down for a while. Reason why it got shut down for a while because wasn't a porn theater, it was a regular theater, but guys was going in there and having sex. And the government came, the health department came and shut it down. He said they opened back up, but what they did was they had cameras. Because they had what they call back rooms. They had 3 of them. And in the back rooms, they got cameras. They got cameras inside. They got to keep an eye on, make sure guys don't have sex. And when he told me that, and this is 2023, this is about a week ago when I got the email, and he told me that, I was like, wow, 2023. And guys, and he's my age, and he claimed there's a lot of guys our age that's in there, but you know, they come there to get these young boys. I didn't know the young boys even know anything about that. But anyway, 2023, things that you were doing in the 70s, you still want to do it. He doesn't have anybody. I don't think he ever had a boyfriend. I know this guy went 20 years. As far as I know, he never had a boyfriend. The sex bar was his life. He went out. He doesn't like the dating line. You know, I call them the sex lines because there's so many scams and so many bullshit on there. He'd rather go to that movie house or once in a while. I think they have a cruising area. So for some of us who are old and grew up in that era, haven't stopped. They found ways or found places that's still doing it. And that's what shocked me. And the reason why I'm doing this podcast is because I'm trying to take all of this in and wondering, well, I don't know. I feel like I have grown. And I could be wrong. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a political. I'm not trying to make judgments. I mean, I just feel weird that here you have guys I grew up with, or the same age as me, who was back there in the 70s, who went through the 80s, went through all that stuff that was going on in the 90s, had a lot of friends that passed away. And I would think, I'm not saying that they wouldn't want sex. I mean, I don't know. For me, like I said, I was always the type that I got to get to know you. Once we get to know each other and have a casual relationship first, then maybe we can, get down. But they don't want that. They don't want that. The guy I'm telling you about who said they shut down that movie house, we had this conversation. And he goes on the sex line, he goes, he like, okay, like young boys. He's just looking for these young boys to give him a blowjob. That's about it. And I asked him about getting into a relationship. Wouldn't you want to have a relationship with him? He goes, no, I can't be bothered with that. I just want the sex. 70-something years old. I don't know. I just feel like I've grown. Maybe I have, maybe I haven't. I mean, I did a lot of crazy stuff back in the 70s. Don't get me wrong. I mean, yeah, I did want back, same thing I want now, I wanted back then, but don't get me wrong. I mean, when you're young, when you get hot and horny, you go and do it. I mean, I've done it. I never went to the sex bar. I wouldn't go to the sex bar anyway looking for a relationship. I did have one friend who did that. I'm not going to mention his name because he might be listening to this podcast. Back in it was 70s, he met his boyfriend in the bathhouse. He met his boyfriend in the bathhouse. They moved in together. They had a relationship. They were in a relationship. They was telling everybody, oh, this is my boyfriend, and we live together. We do these, and they did things together. Called me up one day. He was furious. I said, what happened? I kicked so-and-so out. So why you kick so-and-so out? He goes, I caught him in the bathhouse. I said, what bathhouse? He's the one in Queens. I caught him in the bathhouse. Now, they live in Manhattan, so he caught him in the bathhouse in Queens. And I said, well, what are you doing in the bathhouse in Queens? I just started stuttering. So, who was cheating on who? He went to the bathhouse to fool around and got mad because he caught his so-called husband in the same bathhouse fooling around. I don't know. My name is Eric, and thank you for listening to the craziness that lives inside my hand.